My name is Matthew Sturkey, Vice President of Sales and Marketing. Stone Mill Log and Timber Homes is family owned and operated. We are second generation family business. We started in 1974, so we're going on about 48 years. We specialize in the design, fabrication, and construction of log and timber frame homes only. So if you are interested in a log or timber frame home, you have come to the right place. If you are interested in a brick home, I apologize. This is the wrong presentation, and you're not in the right place. So anybody who is interested in log and timber frame, you have come to the right place. I started here in 1997 professionally. I worked summer jobs out on the road crew, doing little odds and ends summer jobs and winter jobs before I started here professionally in 97. Been with the company ever since, done a little bit of everything from design to project management to sales, marketing, really a little bit of everything, and have worked with a lot of clients over the last, I guess, 25 years or so. So getting into the topic of the presentation, and I think we had so many people registered because everybody wants to know how you build a home from start to finish. And what I would say is that is a really tough thing to cover in an hour. And we're going to try to cover it in 45 minutes so that we can leave a little bit of time left over for some Q&A. So it's really hard to cover that because it's so involved. There's a lot of information to cover when it comes to building a home from start to finish and going through all the steps. So today we're not going to talk about, finding land or designing and building your dream team or designing your home. We're going to kind of pass that stuff, and we're going to assume that everybody on the presentation owns property, has a basic design concept in place, knows fairly close to what they want, and we're going to pick up in kind of the conceptual design process. One of the things that I want to make sure everybody is aware of too is that today we're not going to go through, it's not going to be a step-by-step, because every project is going to vary a little bit based on weather, based on sub availability, based on material availability, especially the climate that we're in. You have to make sure that you are able to manage a project. If you're serving as an owner builder or you're hiring a GC, your general contractor is going to be managing subs, managing materials, managing the flow of the project. So don't underestimate how important that is to keeping a project moving efficiently, knowing that material delays are out there, sub delays are out there. So you want to make sure you're constantly monitoring that. So the goal for the presentation today is to try to educate you on what the basic steps are. We're doing a crash course. We're not doing a comprehensive deep dive into each step of the project. We're going to do a kind of an overview of it so that everybody has a general idea of how you go through this process. And starting with this process, you would actually start in the design and estimating phase. I cannot underscore the importance of this enough, how important it is to start off on the right track, get the project started off on the right foot by starting with a design. Get a conceptual design developed so that you can go out to your general contractor, or if you're an owner builder, you can go out to your subs and you can get good written estimates in place so that you can get a final turnkey estimate in place so that at that point, you know what this whole project investment's going to look like. If you start that process and you do a design and you go out for estimating and it comes back over budget, then you have some time to what we call value engineer and reassess, redesign, specify new materials, and then get an updated estimate so that you can get that budget in line with where you want to be before you move forward into financing and permitting. So I can't underscore the importance of this enough, making sure that you do your due diligence on the front end, you do all this kind of upfront legwork Don't allow, builders to give you allowances, because that sets you up potentially to fail if you haven't made actual selections. So the conceptual plan is an opportunity to pick finishes and fixtures and go and make selections with the GC, get a good, solid, good faith estimate, have the opportunity to value engineer if you need to, and then get a final design in place so that you can go into engineering, get an engineered plan, so that now you're ready for submitting that engineered plan to your lending institution to close on the loan, or if you're not financing, you're ready to send that to the GC so that he can start pulling permits. So we kind of jump forward into financing and permitting. Once you have that final design, we do an engineered stamp set of drawings for every one of our clients that's in the commitment phase. And then once you have that final design, you're ready to go in to your lending institution and actually start closing that loan. The lending institution is typically going to want a final for construction plan. They're going to want a final turnkey good faith estimate with site improvements if you're going to be financing that portion of it. And then they'll send that out for bank appraisals. I have included a link that you guys will get with this presentation as part of being registered and being here. And that is a document that you can send to your lending institution that will educate them on how to appraise a log home. It's a different process. So make sure that you keep that as a good reference to send to your lending institution, or read up about that so that you can send that to your appraiser, because a lending institution is going to do an appraisal on the house before they close on the loan. So moving forward, and again, I apologize, we're going to be going through this fairly quick just to try to get through, but we will have question and answer at the end. So once you've gotten the loan closed, or if you're not financing, you've got final plans to your builder. At that point, he's able to go out to your codes department, submit the plans, submit all the permit information, and get a building permit. Now, if you're serving as an owner builder, that requirement or those requirements might be a little bit different. Those forms will be a little bit different. If you're building your own home, legally, you can serve as your own GC in certain states, but that is not always the case with certain lending institutions. So if you're trying to be an owner builder, you need to check with your codes department and you need to check with your bank. A lot of banks do not want to finance owner builder projects. So just make sure you ask those questions on the front end. I put a link together, and this was just random. I just picked Avery County, North Carolina, so that you could see kind of what some of the building permit requirements are. There's usually a permit application. You've got to fill out a bunch of information. There's a permitting fee that you pay. You submit an engineered set of plans or a for construction set of plans. And then there's other required documents depending on your codes. Codes will vary from state to state, from county to county. There will be places that will build in that literally won't have a building codes department. Does that mean you still have to build a code? Absolutely. You want to build a code, but you may not have a codes department to enforce that. So you want to make sure that you adopt the closest local code, to build to. So yes, you're always going to be building to code, both, county code, state code, and that'll vary from state to state, county to county. And so we build all over the country, and codes will vary all over the country, energy codes, et cetera. So after you get this building permit and your general contractor has the permit in hand, what's next? At that point, if you haven't done your site improvements, and if you're having your general contractor do site improvements, or if you're financing site improvements, this is where you would start working on the improvements and the infrastructure of the site. Clearing the site, getting the trees out, putting a driveway in. If your site is going to have well and septic, then you're not going to be bringing in water or sewer lines from the road. You're going to be drilling a well. You're going to be doing a drain field, getting temporary power in. Typically, if you're bringing in power from the road down your driveway, you're going to cut your trenches in place for your power, for your utilities, your phone. All of that stuff is going to come in from the road. and typically will come in underground. So you want to talk to utility companies to see, what their responsibilities and roles are going to be. And then also, again, a lot of our clients will be working on infrastructure, and a lot of our clients will pay for infrastructure out of pocket. They'll go ahead and start getting a driveway in. They'll go ahead and start working on getting temporary power in and utilities in. You just have to know on the front end what you're going to be putting into your loan, what you're going to be doing, and what your contractor is going to be doing. So be very specific with your GC about infrastructure. If that's something that you want your GC to do, make sure that goes into their scope, into their bid, so that when you turn that into your lending institution, they know who's doing what, and those payouts can happen. So lot preparation will vary from site to site. Some sites will have water at the road, sewer at the road, power at the road, and then others, a lot of the properties that we work with are more rural properties. So you're going to be drilling a well, and you're going to be doing a septic system. One thing about septic that I'll note that's not on here that I'll highlight, so to speak. It's really important that you know what your property is approved for the number of bedrooms that you want to build. Your soil test or your perk test. I recently worked with a client, and am working with a client that was wanting to build a 3-bedroom, and we could not get the property that he wanted to purchase perked for a 3-bedroom. So we had to pull out of that purchase. So make sure that you know what your property perks for, and make sure it perks or it's soil tested for the number of bedrooms that you want to build. Because if you want to build a 3 or 4 bedroom, but the property only perks for 2, you're not going to be able to build what you want. So that is a really important part, of that process, of that preparation. And that, again, goes back to kind of a design. That's all in the whole process of finding land and, procuring land. So a couple of pictures that I incorporated here showing some sites where, it's always a good idea to get a gate at the entrance of your driveway so that you can have some protection for materials that you're going to have on site. But, a good solid gravel driveway, good, nice, wide gravel driveway, putting, temporary power into the property, and then getting a site rough, graded and excavated before you start the next phase of the project. So infrastructure is going to, be specific, but not limited to driveway, water, sewer, or septic, power, phone, gas. If you've got gas at the road, bringing that in as well. Or if you're doing propane, you would be burying a tank. So that's what the infrastructure looks like in getting the site ready, for construction, for, starting that foundation work. So after you get site improvements made, infrastructure in, now you're ready to start the excavation and foundation process. Now you're ready to start, putting out erosion control. If you've got some nice trees on the property, you want to, put some silt fencing around those and protect those so that they don't get damaged during construction. And you're ready to start the excavating process for footings and foundation walls and retaining walls. I'm going to kind of jump ahead to these pictures just because they give you a good visual image, illustration of what a site looks like, that's excavated and ready to start footings. This site right here is a local project here in Pigeon Forge, and this has actually been excavated to be ready for superior walls to come out and start putting all the gravel base in, do all the compacted gravel base, and then your superior walls would come in and be set on that compacted gravel base with your footing drains. And then once those all get set, you typically see a foundation system in a superior wall application that looks like this bottom right picture, where all the walls are in and they're all braced off, and your compacted gravel, your base is in, and everything is ready at that point for, pouring the slab and then putting, subfloor on. So for those of you that are leaning towards, a superior wall system, which is a precast concrete wall system, that is what the site would look like when you got to that point. So, and we're not going to get too deep into different foundation systems. You can go to our YouTube channel and you can go to our website and look at different videos about different types of foundations, and you can look at, some of our past Tip Tuesdays on that. So I don't want to get off on a tangent on that, but depending on what type of foundation you are doing, a site is going to be excavated, it's going to be rough graded, you're going to have somebody typically come in. It's always a good idea, especially for clients that have smaller lots in a development where you've got smaller dimensions of the lot itself, and you're working against setback lines, your front and side setbacks on a smaller piece of property in a development. And, let's say you've got 100 by 100 footprint and you've got 20-foot setbacks on all four sides. Well, now you've really got a 60 by 60 building site. It's probably a good idea to have a surveyor come in and pin the house seat on the property to make sure that the building fits within those setbacks. I have seen people build inside the setback lines, and you have to get variances on that, and that is not a fun process. So it's a really good idea. Now, if you've got 10 acres and you're building in the middle of your property, of your 10 acres, you typically don't have to worry about boundary lines and setbacks, but it's still a good idea to pin at least the boss, what we call the main boss corner of the house seat, so that you can start off on the right foot with footings and foundation walls. So once you've pinned that house seat, you're ready to start footing excavation, footing prep. And then one of the things I've got noted here is inspections. Inspections are going to vary from county to county. If you've got a building codes department that has a long list of inspections, you are going to have inspections called in for footings, for foundation, for framing, for insulation, for electrical. If you're in a county that does not have a building codes department, then you typically don't have a codes official doing inspections. You would typically have, an electrical inspection or certain state inspections. So as an owner builder, make sure you know what inspections you have. Make sure that you work directly with your codes official. One thing, I don't want to get off track, but one thing is really important is you want to set and establish a relationship with your codes department. Do not work against these men or women. Work with them. They are there to protect you, and they are there to make sure that you're building to a high level of quality and you're building a safe structure. They're not trying to prevent you from building, but they will be difficult to work with if you try to buck them. So do work with them. We have really good relationships with codes officials because we are trying to provide them all the information and documentation they need for our clients to safely and effectively and smoothly build a home. So make sure you know what inspections you have. So once you've got everything excavated and you've got everything graded and you've got footings dug out and you've got all the steel in and you've got everything prepped and you've gotten your inspections done and they've approved you to move forward, now you're ready to start concrete and foundation work. And as I said, you've got the illustrations here. The top left is basically an excavated site. The bottom left is where you've got the gravel fill in for a superior wall system. That gets compacted. Once that's done, then Superior Walls comes in with these precast wall panels. They set these panels in place. They tie them all together. Then they brace them off. And now you've got a foundation wall system in place, ready for subfloor, slab, all of that good stuff. So you're ready to move on. So hopefully those pictures will help along the way. So once you get foundation walls, now we're ready. Now you're out of the ground. Everything's going to be a little bit more predictable at that point, and you're ready to start some of your conventional subfloor framing. And we're talking specifically today about log and timber frame, crash course 101 building. We're not talking about conventional stick and brick. We're not talking about vinyl siding. We're talking about building a log or timber frame structure. So The way we've set it up today is specifically for that. So there will be some things that vary. If you go online and you look for a step-by-step of building a home, building a conventional home will be different than building a log home. So it's important that you know some of those different steps. And I always tell people, you don't have to have a general contractor that's necessarily built a log home before. You just have to have a GC that's experienced and that is willing to learn and willing to, be engaged in learning those different steps in the process. And once they get through that learning curve, everybody's good to go. And that's where we come in, because once the foundation wall is done, typically when we start our part of the project, because we do all the unique log and timber frame components, when we come in, a foundation's in, a general contractor or an owner has framed a subfloor to our engineered plans. They have got porch decks in, and in order to get porch decks in, you typically will build a subfloor to get some weight on it. You've still got walls that are braced, and then you'll backfill. And then a lot of times you're able to start doing porch footings so that you can start piers or deck framing at that point, unless you're doing a slab for your porch floors, out around the perimeter. So at that point, again, you're wanting to get inspections done. That's where typically our inspectors for Creekside will come out. Our construction and operations manager, Josh Berry, will typically come out and do a site inspection. He's basically looking at site access. He's looking for, underground utilities so that we're not parking our crane on top of them. He's looking at the dimensions of the subfloor and the foundation to make sure everything matches the plan. We're just trying to determine everything on the front end before we send a crew out there with logs. So once at that point, typically when we come in, if we jump ahead a slide, we're going to come in when the site is pretty much to this point. You've got foundation in, you've got subfloor in, and then the porch decks, any porch floors would be conventionally framed by a local sub per our plan and be in place before we arrive. So that, and when I say porch decks, I'm meaning the floors, this part, if you can see my screen, and you can see my mouse, the floor basically of the porch would be in, along with the subfloor. And then you'd have, any flashing detail in before we start setting logs. So once we get subfloor and porch decks in, that's when we start coming in to construct the shell. And your shell construction will vary between log and timber frame construction. And I'm not going to go into a long difference about what the two types are. Again, you can watch videos, lunch and learns, where we've done specific topics on the difference between log versus timber frame. But in a nutshell, if you look at these pictures, this is a log structure. You're using log walls for your horizontal. The horizontal log walls are your structural walls. For a timber frame, you've got an open, vertical, and horizontal timber frame shell. So in shell erection for a timber frame, we come in, same thing, subfloors in, porch decks are in, the timber frame shell goes in. For a log structure, you would have basically the log walls in, the timber roof in, and that gives you an open frame. Now, the dry-in phase of a log structure is going to be different than a timber frame. With a log structure, we're typically doing structural insulation panels on the roof when there's timber roof construction. The gables and dormers are all pre-framed and the exterior sheathing's in place. And then for a timber frame, we would typically enclose that frame with what we call a SIP panel, which is a structural insulation panel, or that would get enclosed with a conventional overbuild. And so that will vary from site to site, and it'll vary from job to job. So I'm just trying to give you a little bit of a snapshot. With a log structure, you can see when it's dried in, we've got basically the roof to finished underlayment. These gable ends would be framed with the exterior sheathing in place. And then typically this picture is a little farther along. We leave with roof to finished underlayment, porch to finished underlayment, gables and dormers are framed and sheathed, and you don't have window and doors installed at that point. With a timber frame, we would have the frame in place. We would have the sit panels in, and the envelope of the structure would be what we call dried in. So after the shell construction is done, this is when you start doing some of the exterior finishes. And I put a note up in that log and timber frame construction. And basically what that note is it's really important that that your general contractor and the owner, if you're serving as an owner builder, it's really important that you know what your scope is and what your role is with regards to building a log or timber frame home. So, for example, knowing that you've got to have foundation, subfloor, and porch decks in before we arrive, and then we come in to do the unique log and timber frame work. And then also one of the things that sometimes people, forget or misunderstand, any type of conventional building material that would be necessary to get the structure dried in, bracing lumber, those types of things, is going to be material that we're going to give you a list of and want you to provide from a local building supply. It doesn't make sense for us to provide conventional lumber. You can get that from your local building supply a lot cheaper. They'll deliver it to you typically for free. And if we were providing it, we would get it from the same local building supply in your area. And we typically try not to provide dimensional lumber. That is just not our specialty. Lowe's, Home Depot, 84 Lumber, Menards, all of those building supplies can provide that material more economically than we can. The reason I'm pointing this out is just to make sure that you understand who's doing what, who's on first, who's on second, and make sure that you don't miss it in that estimating or in that building process, because we try to eliminate surprises for our clients. And it doesn't always happen, but we try to eliminate as many surprises as we can. That means you're happier, more satisfied in the long run. That's another reason we do these presentations, is to try to educate clients on the building process. So really important to know, who's doing what the scope is. Once you get that log shell erected or that timber frame erected and dried in and those sit panels in, then at that point it's time to start working on siding material and even rake material. That's basically the fascia material. That's the material that goes around kind of the perimeter. And I'll kind of jump back to these pictures. That's the finished fascia material that goes up these rakes and the eaves of your gable dormers and the eaves of your roof lines. And those are the rakes of your porches and the eaves to cover up the rafter tails. So there's a lot of different areas that have to be covered. What we're doing is providing a rough shell dried in. It's not a finished product. It's got to be finished at that point. So putting on siding, and this is where I put in, at that point, once you get, like with a log construction, when you get all your exterior wood in, all of your fascia and siding material in, and all your exterior millwork and your railing materials, if that's going to be wood, that's a good time to come in and actually start cleaning the structure. Before you start putting wood treatment products on, you want to get the surface nice and clean before you start applying those coatings. So the first step in wood treatment application and any staining application is to clean the surface. So I tell people, this is the best time to go in there, give it a nice clean, get the dirt off, get the, any construction debris, any construction dust, any pollen that pollen is a huge thing in the Southeast. Get the pollen off of it. Give it a good cleaning, because you don't want to get too far down the road, get windows and doors in, especially if you're using a clad wood window and you've got a wood interior window. You don't want to start putting a bunch of water on the inside of that structure if it's too far down the road. So when it's open, erected, dried in, in that rough stage, that's a good time to go in there and give it a good bath, give it a good cleaning, and make sure that you're not doing that too far down the road. And this step will vary with the timber frame, because with a timber frame, you're closing in that structure with SIPs. And so a lot of times with timber framing, you're not cleaning the structure with a pressure cleaner. You're actually doing a lot of sanding at that point, doing a lot of compressed air. And a timber frame that whole step will be done a little differently. So again, there are differences between those two, and that that's why I wanted to point that out. And then once you get it cleaned, yeah, now you're ready for window and door installation and doing exterior trim out so that the applicator who's doing the wood treatment can come in and start staining all these wood surfaces, start caulking all the trim between the logs and the windows, start flashing everything. And then at that point, once you get all your wood treatment on, all your stains on, all your clear coats on, now you can start doing roofing installation. A lot of times, you'll get sometimes where roofs will go ahead and go on and then applicators are having to work around a roof. It's really a good idea to go ahead and get wood treatment installed, get stains and clear coats done before you put finished roofing on, because you don't want to be up on top of a roof putting stain on and worry about getting stain on a metal roof. So that's the reason a lot of times you want to go ahead and do that before that roofing gets installed. So once you get all your, and then some people will actually do the upper part, like the gables and the dormers. Like if I go back to these pictures, like they'll go ahead and get all the siding on, windows and doors in, and go ahead and do all the wood treatment above the roof line. And then they'll come back in and do roofing material. And then they'll do the bottom part underneath after the fact. So again, there's not a universal one size fits all step by step where you follow this checklist every time, because it's going to vary. This is going to vary from job to job. You're going to run into weather issues. You're going to run into subcontractor delays or material delays, and you've got to improvise and you've got to stay efficient and make sure that project keeps moving along. Or if you're hiring a general contractor, that's their job. Put that on them. Make sure they're managing those subs and those materials. That's what you're paying them for. All right, so now we've got, sorry, I jumped ahead. So now we've got roofing installation done. You're in a position at that point, and you've got your exterior. I won't say it's completed, but it's in a good place. You've got most of your exterior work done. At that point, some of the things that you might still lack would be finished electrical trim out, like putting, ceiling fans, or putting lights on the outside porches, or putting wall sconces in, putting some of those things on the exterior. But your exterior is definitely much farther along. And it's time at that point, once you get everything really dried in on the outside, you can start then working on your interior. And at that point, your interior, once you get it ready, you're going to start in that rough in phase. And when I say rough in, I'm talking about rough in framing. I'm talking about mechanical, plumbing, electrical, which we have an acronym called MPE. So if you ever hear that, that's mechanical, plumbing, electrical, and doing fireplaces. So in order to do rough in plumbing and electrical and mechanical, you got to have wall framing in. So you frame all those interior partition walls. Not all of the interior walls are log. In fact, typically for a log structure, your perimeter walls are log and your structural load-bearing walls are log, or sometimes they're log headers, what we call fly logs. So make sure you know on your plan what walls are log and what walls are framed, because once the log structure goes up, you'll have to come in and frame those interior partitions. They're non-load bearing partition walls. They just divide rooms like bedrooms and baths and closets and laundry rooms, and they're not structural. In fact, they'll be framed in a way that will accommodate for settlement, and they're going to be framed differently than what you would typically find in a conventional home. But at that point, once those walls are framed, then you can bring in your electrician, your plumber, your mechanical contractors to do all their roughing. And I made a note there that during log and timber frame construction, your electrician will be on site doing electrical rough-in for the log structure and the timber frame structure with the SIPs. So it's really important. A lot of that coordination gets done on the front end in the design process. So make sure that is something that you think about on the front end. That's something that will get addressed and get discussed in kind of the planning and design phases of the project. And then once you've got mechanical, plumbing, electrical simultaneously, you'll have somebody coming in and doing your fireplace work, whether you're doing a metal insert or whether you're doing a full masonry fireplace and firebox, or if you're doing a masonry box like an isokern or an earth core like isokern or a fire rock product. Also, again, I put this on a lot of these different steps. Make sure that you're constantly communicating with your codes department, or if you've got a general contractor, they'll be working with the codes department. Your codes department will give you a list of what inspections are required. If you're serving as an owner builder, just make sure you're constantly going back to that list to make sure you know what inspections they have, so that you can order those inspections before you move forward. Because I will tell you, if you get everything roughed in and you insulate and put wall coverings on, and if you had a framing inspection, your codes department will typically make you pull that wall covering off and that insulation out to inspect the framing. So just make sure that you check on what inspections you have. Again, if you hire a general contractor, which a lot of you will, that's going to be their responsibility. That's going to be on them. And so once you get that framing inspection done, that rough-in inspection done on the MPE, then at that point, now you're starting to see this thing come together, and you're starting to insulate walls, and you're starting to put wall coverings on and ceiling finishes in and some of that finish out. And you're starting to see a lot of those selections that you made on your interior walls, whether it's tongue and groove, or whether it's a reclaimed barn wood, or whether it's, a drywall in some areas. You'll start to see those wall finishes go on. And that is really when it gets exciting to kind of see it all start to come together. So, with a timber frame, obviously that's something, once you get the timber frame up and the sit panels in, you're going to have all your finished siding products for the exterior and the interior, much like you have with a conventional home. With a log structure, obviously you don't have siding to do on the log walls, because that's the finished log wall. That's the finished look. But there will be areas like up in the gable ends and up in the dormers. And I go back to that picture again to show you these are gable dormers right here. So you'll have finished siding to do on the interior. This exterior portion would already be done, by you in that earlier step. But once you start putting wall insulation in and getting rough and electrical, that inside of that gable end wall has to be covered. And whether that's with log siding, or that's with tongue and groove or drywall, that will vary with every homeowner based on what they want that finished product to look like. So at that point, you're going to be putting wall coverings on. If there was, let's say we had log walls and we were doing a conventional, pre-engineered truss on the wings of a house, well, you've got to put a finished product. Once you get all that electrical done and all of that mechanical done and all the insulation done and everything inspected, then you'd have to put a ceiling finish on that conventional roof. If it's a timber roof, then it's typically going to have tongue and groove on it, all the sit panels on the roof, and you don't have a finish on that. And then, all your interior partition walls. So a lot of our clients will want to put, drywall in the bathrooms or drywall in the closets, and then in the master bedroom, they might do a log siding or do a tongue and groove or do a wood finish. We get it kind of a mixed bag. Our clients are typically going away from drywall and going more towards all wood. All right, so we move on past insulation and wall coverings, and now we're starting to get into some of the interior finish out and interior wood treatment and into the cabinetry. So once you've got your wall coverings on, you can start working on window and door trim, working on base trim. Base trim will vary in height with client. These are all the specifics that go in, and this is the beauty about building a new home. Every one of these decisions is something that's going to be yours. The way that this thing finishes out will have to do with every decision that you make. And so you don't have to settle for anything. So if you want your stairs to look a certain way, that is all your choice. And that is one of the biggest advantages about building new, is that you get all of the new technology, all the new material, and everything's going to look exactly the way you want it to. That's the reason it's such a custom home, because it's your selections, your finishes, your decisions and nobody else's. You don't go into a pre-existing home and have to settle for anything. You're building this brand new. This is from scratch, from ground zero. So once you get those interior finishes on, now you can get that applicator back in to do that interior wood treatment. And note that, that applicator is typically coming in to do the exterior first, and then he's going to come back and do the interior. They're not going to do interior and exterior all at the same time. And a lot of times, especially with log construction, and when we're talking about like chinked log construction, like our chinked log profile, and this is not the case with a log on log. With a chinked log profile, you typically chinking will be one of the last things that you do on the exterior to finish it. And then chinking will be one of the last things that you do on the interior. And it'll happen typically in 2 phases. So if you can find a local chink and stain applicator, great. A lot of painters will do staining. Chink applicators will be doing that. And we've got applicator lists for chinking and staining all over the country. So if you need help finding a subcontractor or your GC needs help finding a sub, we can help you with that. So once you get all the interior stains on and the clear coats on and everything starts to really come to life, now you're ready to start doing some of that cabinetry installation. I like chinking the house before you do cabinetry installation, because your cabinets are going to go up against those walls. You want that to be closed off. You don't want that to be open with just insulation. Now, obviously it's finished on the outside, but it's good to go ahead and chink behind those areas so that you can then put your cabinetry up against a finished surface. If you chink after you install cabinetry, your chinker won't be able to get behind the cabinets. So it's good to do that prior to cabinetry installation. And then once you get cabinets in, now you're ready for top installation. You're ready for doing your granite or your concrete tops or whatever. I put this note on every page for a reason, because I want to make sure that if you're like frantically taking notes, you don't need to. Go ahead and stop doing that right now. You're going to get this presentation as part of this lunch and learn, but also don't write these things down. This is not always step by step. This is not a complete list. Your general contractor or your subs will help you through this process. This is basically an overview. This is a crash course 101, 10,000 foot view, not a deep dive into every, section of the building process. And I know I'm going fast. I'm trying to be respectful of everybody's time, and we're going to get through it. So, these are some pictures. Top left shows interior rough in. You can see that settlement space that is up at the top of the interior walls to allow for settlement in a log structure. The bottom left right here is showing once that inspection's done, the framing inspection's done, and everything's approved, and you've got all your electrical roughed in, and you've got all your plumbing roughed in, mechanicals in, and it's time to start putting wall insulations in, ceiling insulations in, and then you can see some of this rough in for the electrical and the mechanical. Fireplaces would be in at that time. Your firebox, your chimneys, your stonework are in. And then, like I said, before cabinets and tops go in, you want to get that interior chinking done, all that wood treatment done. Your wood treatment always happens before you chink a home. And if you're doing a log on log profile without that chink joint, then you don't have to worry about chinking. That's one less thing you have to do. Your a log on log is basically a wood to wood. It doesn't have that chink joint. All right, now we're moving on. Now you can start to see at this point, you can really start to see some light at the end of the tunnel. You're starting to work on interior trim out. You're starting to do your fixtures. You're putting mechanical covers on, like your register covers on, and you're starting to put your fixtures in. You're putting bathroom fixtures in and toilets in, and you're getting electrical fixture put on, and you're putting those chandeliers in, and you're putting those wall sconces on and those ceiling fans in. Everything's starting to really come to life so that you can kind of hit that final step of flooring and doing interior finish hardware and putting knobs and pulls on cabinets and putting towel rods in and shower curtains, or putting, rod holders in and putting lock sets on the doors. So you can start to really see this thing, start to take shape. And I'm going to move an image ahead where you can start to see them, doing all the finish on the flooring. Now, you wouldn't have to worry about this if you chose a pre-finished flooring product. Pre-finished products are very desirable because you don't have to go through this long staining process. If you do an unfinished wood floor, that whole process can take 2 weeks to do. So, a pre-finished product goes in, it's already pre-finished, and it's a lot faster. It's bathroom, putting in your electrical fixtures and doing your finished trim out with the actual fixtures, and putting, sinks and faucets in, and getting all your finished hardware in. To get to that point of where you're at that finish line, and then finishing touches, really important to make sure that you incorporate those into your budget, because I see people, kind of miss that final step, that, seating or that sod, if you're going to, be doing any final grading or any landscaping. And landscaping is that can take on a huge form, from people wanting to go back just to kind of natural landscaping to, I've seen clients put $50,000 to $100,000 budgets in place for landscaping. I'm not saying you're going to do that, but just make sure you know what, trees and shrubs you're putting in, and that you've got a good solid estimate in place for landscaping. Because at that point, before you start doing landscaping and seeding or sod, you want to get all that construction debris removed for the final time, get that dumpster moved out of the site, get the site cleaned up, get that interior cleaning done. And when I say interior cleaning, there are professional construction cleaners. I would not just get Mary Maids to come out there and do a quick cleanup. There are construction cleanings. They'll come in, with shop vacs, and they understand how to get into all the deep surfaces to clean everything, cleaning out all the registers for the mechanical ducts, and getting all that construction debris out and getting all that cleaned out is really important. And then doing your final inspections. You can't typically move in until you get a certificate of occupancy. That's coming from your codes department. They're coming out to make sure everything is going to check out. It's safe, it's built to code, and everything is ready to move into at that point. So now you're at the finish line. You've got your certificate of occupancy, and at that point you're ready to start enjoying this beautiful new log or timber frame home that you have built, that you have put to life in essence, and now you're starting to kind of realize that dream of what you set out to do. And so some final remarks, and again, I'm not going to really talk about this one too much, but it's important to know that the building process will be subject to change. You'll run into weather issues, especially if you are out in some of the western states at higher altitudes. If you're in Colorado or Montana, your building season is shorter than if you're building in the southeast. So building process will vary from region to region, state to state, county to county, site to site, based on topography, weather, material availability, sub availability. I will say, in this climate, for those of you who are building, think ahead. Make sure that you're planning ahead. Be extremely organized if you're an owner builder. Now, if you're hiring a GC, that's on them. But make sure that you're ordering things way ahead of time. So I typically right now I'm ordering windows and doors. If we're providing windows and doors for a project, and we'll typically provide, we're a Pella distributor. I'm ordering windows and doors like 3 to 4 months, sometimes 5 months ahead of time. So be planning ahead, think about, really 2 or 3 steps down the road. Don't just be one step at a time. Be looking at all of those steps down the line to make sure that materials are being ordered ahead of time and everything's going to be in and ready. And a lot of our clients are, putting those pods, those storage pods on their site, or a lot of our clients are building on basements, and that's where their garage is, or they're using a basement to store materials, or they're using a garage to store materials, or they're getting one of those building pods out on the site to store materials that are coming in earlier than needed. But it's good to have it. Then it's good to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So be very organized in this process. And then the final remark is just make sure you hire the right team of professionals. We did a lunch and learn, months ago on assembling your dream team. You can find that video. I put a link to it right here. Also put a link to our YouTube channels, and we've got some great lunch and learn presentations, and we've got some great Tip Tuesdays and that's not to say watch every single one of them. Nobody has that amount of time, but make sure you get educated and do your due diligence on the front end. Make sure that this is something that you don't just, kind of just jump into without being prepared. It's important that you communicate at a high level in this process with your GC, or if you're serving as an owner builder, that you communicate at a high level with your subcontractors. And so I just say, think ahead, get the right team of professionals together to help you through this process. And this process can be smooth, it can be enjoyable, it can be efficient, and it can just be the best thing that you've ever done, because you're realizing that dream of building that home that you've always wanted exactly the way that you want. So that's it. I know I've just covered a lot of information in 52 minutes. I think probably at this point, if your head's not spinning, just give it a couple of minutes, let it settle in, and it will. I know it's a lot of information that I'm not expecting everybody to, grasp in a short period of time. This is a process. Your sales consultants for our team are there to help you through this process. This is just an opportunity for us to do it in a larger setting with a lot more people and communicate some of this process and educate our clients through that. That is our goal in these presentations, is to make sure that we're educating you on the steps to building a successful log or timber frame home. So I've enjoyed it. I'll turn the floor over to Dawn at this point with any questions, and then we'll try to get through those questions. If we go a little bit over and you want to stick around, please do so. I'll go till maybe 5 or 10 after, if anybody wants to stick around. If you need to head out, feel free to. If you need to get back to work, or if you've got to be somewhere, we understand. And if that's the case, we appreciate you being here, and we're grateful that you spent the time with us today. All right, Dawn.
All right, so we do have some questions, and I'll just start with the first one. What is the build time comparison between a log and timber frame home versus a traditional conventional home?
A really good question. So what you will typically find in log construction and timber frame, and I'm not an expert in conventional construction, although I've been around it long enough. We typically are telling clients 8 to 12 months is the general time frame from when you break ground to when you move in. Now that's an average. We do get some clients that time frame used to be a little sooner, but with this type of climate, I would say prepare for 12 months. 10 to 12 months is probably more realistic, just given some of the material delays that you will face in this type of market. And that's why I said, plan ahead. Make sure that you're ordering windows and doors months ahead. Make sure you're not waiting till the last minute to get these materials. And if you do, you can dramatically speed up that process. Now, with conventional construction, it's a custom home. It's going through the same process that you're going through with a log home. It's just going to have differences. It's not more difficult to build a log home. It's just different. But you're going to run into the same time frame. I think if you look at conventional construction custom, and I'm talking about, when I say custom, I'm not talking about track home building. I'm not talking about going out there and building, stick and vinyl with carpet and drywall. That's just not a fair comparison between a high-end custom log and timber frame home. So if you're looking at a high-end custom stick home with a lot of stone and a lot of wood finish on the interior and a lot of customization, you're going to run into the same time frames. I mean, I would say honestly, a log home would probably be take a little longer just because it's a little different and it's a little bit more unique. Electrical will take a little bit longer. But if you think about it, the shell structure and one of the advantages to log construction is that time efficiency of the skeleton itself. When we come out to build a shell, we can typically get a log shell dried in about 2 to 3 weeks. We're enclosed, so we're much further along. So theoretically, because of the fact that we pre-cut all the materials, a timber frame is all pre-cut, the sit panels are all pre-cut with a log structure, the walls are pre-cut, the floor, the roof is pre-cut, the porch material is ready to assemble. We're building a structure in a much quicker time frame for our part and getting enclosed and drying faster. And you're farther along than you are with a conventional stick home. And so theoretically, the time frame should be, as fast or faster with log if you from that point move efficiently through the process and you plan and communicate and you're organized. So hope that answers that question.
I think that's great. And so going into the next question, this one is about geothermal systems. How many vendors do we work with that install geothermal?
So that's going to be kind of regional. Geothermal has been around. I've been involved in projects with geothermal for a couple of decades. I will say though, it is not something that is as widely used as your conventional, mechanical systems or your conventional power sources like electric and gas. So make sure that you're communicating with somebody that has experience in geothermal. I'm talking to a client right now down in Georgia that's got a big lake. They want to do geothermal. So that would actually be more of a question for your general contractor. The general contractor would be the one that would interface with your geothermal, provider, supplier, service provider, because that's basically more of a general contractor scope. Obviously, that would not have a huge interface with a log structure. Obviously, it goes into building this home, but geothermal is basically that power source coming into your mechanical system, and that would be an interface more with your general contractor than it would be for us. We're in essence a subcontractor for building the unique log and timber frame structure. We're not doing, if you're in North Carolina or Georgia or you're in Colorado, we're not the general contractor. The only time, really never, we're never the general contractor, because if you're local, we're basically partnering up with local GCs to do all that finish work. And again, if you're building in an area that we've got a lot of homes in, we will have, GC referrals and GC partners that we can refer you to. That's still your responsibility to go out and, vet them out and make sure that you have a good relationship with them and that you communicate well with them. And in fact, we've done lunch and learn presentations on finding the right GC. So you can watch those. But to go back to answer your question, the geothermal system, the geothermal installer will be somebody that your general contractor will interface with and work with. So we don't really have specific providers for that.
And then this question, Matthew, always comes up. Do we have a list of general contractors? So, maybe you can explain a little bit how, we do build nationwide. I know that's, I don't think a lot of general contractors probably don't travel that far. So.
Yeah, great. Again, great question. We just kind of touched on it briefly, but I'll take a little deeper dive into it. And that is, we build, nationwide, but we also build in more pockets. So if we're building, in North Carolina, a lot of our construction in North Carolina is going to be in your mountain and lake communities, the Western North Carolina Appalachian Range, Lake Norman, some of those areas. So if you're building out on the East Coast, on the coast of North Carolina over, in Wilmington, I'm probably not going to have a GC referral in that area. If you're building in the Asheville area, that's a different story. If you're building in East Tennessee or North Georgia or Southern Kentucky, or even up in Pennsylvania, there are times where, we've got a lot of GC referrals. So don't worry, if we have a GC or a homeowner in your area, we are going to refer you to that homeowner, to that general contractor, somebody that's reputable and that is experienced. But one of the things that I'll point out is that if we don't have a GC that we can refer you to, don't worry about it. We'll help you find a good, reputable, honest, experienced general contractor. I talked to a new general contractor yesterday. He's out of Atlanta. We're looking at a project in South Atlanta, kind of between Atlanta and Macon. And this guy asked some phenomenal questions. And we had about an hour-long conversation. And we just kind of got him educated on the differences of log and timber frame construction, because this client is wanting to build a timber frame. And after an hour conversation, he was very kind of through that learning curve, so to speak, about how this process works and what we do and what our role is and what scope we provide. So don't stress out if you can't find if we can't give you a GC name. We can help you source one, or we'll help you even through that interview process, to educate them on our part and what we do and how this process works. So to answer the question specifically, we do have general contractors in certain areas, pocket areas. But again, if you're building in, southern New Mexico, I may not have a GC that we worked with before. We may just have to go out and find somebody that's reputable and experienced and that builds a high quality home.
All right. Here's a question, and I think this is a good thing to point out too. Can you do electrical and plumbing as an owner builder, or do you have to have a licensed professional?
That's a great question. And typically with electrical, that is more of a statewide code requirement. And that is one of those things that I've never seen a scenario where an owner can hook up their electrical to their box. Now, there are some situations where our owner builders will actually bring in a licensed electrician to basically do the circuit box and hook everything up, and then the homeowner will do a lot of the rough end, just pulling the wire. But I would double check with your state and local codes department to see what you're able to do. Electrical is one of those things that is typically not allowed, for sweat equity. Now, again, that goes back to having a licensed electrician that is going to pull the permit and going to hook everything up to the circuit breaker and do all the final inspections. And then in some scenarios, will allow the homeowner to come in and do all the pulling the wiring and do all the rough in. You just want to be very specific about what you're doing. In fact, we built a timber frame out on Lake Tellico Lake here locally, and the owner found a licensed electrician that would allow him to do that. But sometimes electricians don't want homeowners doing that. So just do your due diligence on the front end with that. Same thing with plumbing. Plumbing is probably a little bit more forgiving. I won't say that's maybe not the right word for it, but it's not as scrutinized, so to speak. But do check with your codes department and the state and local codes authorities on what you're allowed and not allowed to do there.
Okay, we have a pretty specific question about kitchen cabinets against a log wall. This person has asked, is there a way to prevent the kitchen cabinets from shifting as the log wall settles? Asking about slide mounts. Do you maybe go into detail about how that works?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I go back to this illustration. With interior walls, they're going to be framed in a manner. Again, it's not difficult, it's just different. The way you connect a partition wall in a log home to a log wall is different than the way you would do it in a conventional home. There are what we call wall lead connections. and there are split top plates in the framing. So that's for your partitions. Now, it's not much different with cabinetry. With overhead cabinets and even base cabinets, you'll typically frame and fur the wall out from a log wall with the settlement allowance, and then you'll put basically strips, what we call fur out strips, and then you'll apply sheathing to that furred out wall, and that's what you'll hang your cabinetry to. That's the best way to do it, and we provide the details in our drawings, and we've got construction details that we can show your general contractor and your subs on how to properly fur out that wall for the cabinetry, because you can, there's other ways to do it, but to me, they're not as desirable. You can actually slot the back of your cabinetry, but that is not the best way to allow for settlement in a log home with cabinetry. It's best to fur the wall out. That also gives you a nice area that you can put, a tile backsplash on if you want to, between the overhead cabinets and the base cabinets, or if you want to leave the log walls exposed, you can do that as well. So in this application, these walls actually are the cabinetry is slotted on the back to allow the log walls to settle. And really, in your base cabinets, by the time you get to base cabinetry and cabinetry, a good bit of your settlement, if not the majority of it, has already taken place. You still want to allow for settlement in your cabinetry just in case you get any additional settlement after that first winter cycle when everything really, does its final acclimation. So yeah, we do provide details for that. And generally, those log walls are furred out for installation of the cabinetry to allow for settlement behind them. Same thing would be the case for like a custom tile shower that's against an outside perimeter log wall. That shower area would be furred in, and it would not be connected directly to the log wall. That log wall would have the settlement allowance behind it.
Okay, so we got another question here. Have you worked with barn timbers as part of a timber frame build? And if so, what challenges did we face?
Yeah, so we tend to steer clear of doing reclaimed timber frame projects for several reasons. One is going to be the overwhelming cost of using reclaimed antique timbers. The amount of cost associated with getting the timbers, getting them disassembled from an old barn or an old structure, or finding somebody that's got them sitting on a yard, all that cost is already factored into, buying those timbers. And then you've got the issue of, dry rot. I mean, you're talking about 100 to 150-year-old material. And then you run into the issue of, like this project right here at the bottom, the back portion is a timber frame. The front portion of this home, and you can see it on our site, it's under the Pollard project. The front section was a reclaimed log structure, and there was not enough material building the log structure to complete the job. And you run into sourcing material and finding enough material to do a job. And if you don't have enough material, going out and finding material that matches, and the wall thicknesses that matches, and the species that match, and the time period that matches. Because if you're doing a reclaimed structure, you're doing a structure that might be 150 years old. You're not going to go find logs that are 100 to put into a 150-year-old reclaimed project, because the species are not going to match, the grain's not going to match, the size of the material is not going to match, the finish isn't going to match. So you run into a lot of these challenges that you just don't face with new construction. And so we tend to stay away from doing reclaimed projects. It's not to say that we can't. It just gets very, very cost prohibitive to do. And it's hard to structurally grade 150-year-old timber. A lot of the reclaim projects that you see, a lot of that material is deco. We do a lot of work in some of these like higher end communities like Blackberry Mountain Club, and all of those reclaimed timbers and those applications are mostly deco applications. When I say deco, I mean decorative. It's not a structural application. And so that's a lot of the reason we use new construction, because we can grade all of our timber. It's all structurally graded. You know, everything is going to be built to an engineered stamp set of drawings. So it's got to meet a certain grade specification. And that's not something that we can do with 150-year-old reclaimed timber.
All right, Matthew, I think we've made it through all the questions.
Oh, wonderful.
I know. So we're doing good on time. Unless anyone else has another question, I don't see anything else. I think we've covered a lot of information. I do want to point out that this presentation, so if you came in late, this presentation is being recorded. It will be posted on our YouTube channel, and I will send out an email probably Monday or Tuesday next week. It'll have the presentation in a PDF format, so you can have access to all the links. And then if you need anything else, just send me an email and let me know. Especially if you go on our YouTube channel, you can watch all of our past Lunch and Learns and our Tip Tuesdays. Our past Lunch and Learns, they may, talk about a handout or a presentation. If you need a copy of one of those, just shoot me an email and let me know, and I will gladly send that to you. So
yeah, and let me say final point to add to that. We're here to help partner with you and to guide you through this process. We by no means expect for you to retain all of the information from an hour-long Lunch and Learn presentation. This is an educational opportunity, but we are here. Your sales consultant is here to help you through the process. Your general contractor is somebody that is going to help you through the process. If you are serving as an owner builder, we can help you through this process as well with all the log and timber related items. So don't try to, it can be overwhelming. Don't let this presentation overwhelm you. This was a crash course. A crash course, and by definition, is going to be overwhelming. And that was not the intent, but we wanted to try to educate you on the different steps that are involved. So if you have additional questions, feel free to reach out to us anytime. Sales consultant will be able to help you. If they're not available, ask for me. I'm happy to help along the way as well. So,
all right. Well, that wraps it up. So appreciate everyone coming today. Check out our YouTube for more videos. We have over 100 videos on there. I'm going to put a little plug out for social media too. So check us on Facebook. We do try to keep, current project pictures going up on there. So things that, if one of the guys goes to a job site and we see something cool that we think our followers want to see, we'll post it on our Facebook page. Our website is more of our professional stuff. So Facebook is more of our nitty gritty. But if you guys need anything marketing wise, just let me know. Otherwise, get in touch with your sales consultant if you have any other questions.
Thank you, Dawn. Thanks everybody for being here. Happy Friday and Father's Day. Everybody have a great weekend and stay safe this weekend.
See you guys. Bye.
Take care.